Welcome to the Misophonia Podcast, episode 14. My name is Adil Ahmad, and I have misophonia. This week I'm talking to Ellen, who I met the past couple of years at the annual Misophonia Association convention, something I recommend people look into. As of now, in mid-February, we should be getting details about tickets soon for this year's convention. All I know so far is that it'll be in early October in Philadelphia. I'll have a link to the Misophonia Association in the show notes. Ellen also started one of the regional online support groups, in her case, for the Northeast United States. And through that, she runs that region's Facebook group and runs a conference call that happens every other week. I'll have her contact info in the show notes as well if you want to learn more about that. During our conversation here, we hit on a lot of the same themes that we all face. A classic origin story growing up with family. We talk a lot about the challenges she faced in school, all the way up to grad school. Then later we talk about bringing up miso with potential new friends and things like diet, alcohol, and healthy living. If you'd like to help the podcast, please leave a quick rating or even a review in iTunes to help get up in the algorithm and reach more people like you. But for now, here's my conversation with Ellen. Thanks for coming out. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Adil. It's nice to talk to you again.
Yeah, so for the audience, I know I've met Ellen at the Misophonia Association convention that happens every year around October. So that most recent one, well, at the time I was recording, was some few weeks ago or so. And we connected there, like I've connected with a lot of people, and I'm glad to have you here, Ellen. So why don't you, I actually kind of forget, where are you located?
So I'm in New Jersey, just outside of Philadelphia. So
oh, right. Okay. So Philly's going to be good.
Sometimes I say I'm in Philly if, people are a little funny about Jersey, so it's easy to say
I
the
think
city.
that show had a lot to do with that probably. Or,
yes, exactly. Jersey Shore.
So what do you do again? You're...
So I work for like a medical practice, and I do some of the business administration. So I actually get to do a good chunk of my work from home. It's a lot of computer stuff and phone calls. So in terms of the misophonia environment, it's definitely been a blessing to be able to do that.
Yeah, it's great. I work from home too. And do you have anybody else at home that's home during the day?
No, just my dog. So, we get out, and she's never bothered me. I'm sure we'll get into that. But, animals have always just made me very comfortable, and she never triggers me or anything like that. So, she usually sits right by me while I'm doing work, and it's a pretty relaxed environment. And
that's great. And has she kind of comforted you during reactions too? In some way, just
a bit. I mean, she's always sort of with us. So if we have people over, I mean, she's always sort of around. So she has a comfort. But I probably could have used her during my earlier years. So I'm in my 30s now. I feel a little better adjusted to the whole misophonia thing. But she certainly could have come in handy in my teens and younger.
Yeah. So about those years, tell me about around, when you kind of sensed something was different.
Yeah. So what I remember is, so I was about 8 years old. So I was in third grade. I don't really remember anything specifically happening that started it. Just all of a sudden noticing a pattern of being really bothered by the way my dad was eating. So we, had a big precedent on family meals, and we did them every day. And my mom made all the meals, so it was, up until that point, a really nice experience. And all of a sudden I started feeling, agitated, and I would mimic my dad's sounds, which caused a lot of stress. So I've heard now, in attending the conference and reading different things, that's like a fairly common thing that happens, is just repeating the sound back to the person.
As a way to kind of cope, as a coping mechanism.
Yeah, so it felt like at the time that I was just so annoyed by it that I almost wanted him to hear how ridiculous it was. But of course, my mimic was, over the top. It was exaggerated. And from his perspective, I'm sure it just seemed like I was, pretty ungrateful and being pretty bratty by doing that. And it immediately became a stressor because, I had a great relationship with my parents. So, I love my dad to death. He still triggers me to this day. But I couldn't express that then. So I always, would feel guilty afterwards. Why am I feeling that way? All he's doing is eating. And fairly quickly it progressed to then also being my mom and then my brother. So it was the three people I was most often around. It seems, in talking to other people, that that's pretty common too, I guess, that it's unfortunately the people we're with the most or the people we love the most, which can be quite confusing when you're young and trying to figure out why you're feeling this way. That's pretty much what I remember.
And did he? So when you were mimicking, it seemed like, did he take it personally? Like it was so out over the top that you? Or was it more your guilt? Like you felt like he?
It was more just the guilt. So he never got upset with me, but it was more that other people would step in and sort of defend him, which makes total sense. If I had been in that boat, I would have done the same thing. But I just remember like dreading meals, or I would come up with reasons why I couldn't eat, like, oh, I'm not feeling well, or I'm not hungry, or I have homework to do, or there's always something. So it progressed throughout middle and high school. It got worse and worse. And I think just other, like hormonal changes and stressors of being around kids and all these things, I would definitely be very like reactionary. So I would get up from the table sometimes and yell. I have like awful memories of, terrible to think about now, but one time I actually got up, and I think my mom was pretty frustrated at that point and said, "You have to sit here." And I like smacked her arm because I was like, I need to get out of here. And that's so not my personality. And it was awful because I thought, where is this coming from? I'm such a happy person. I love being around people. And then it's just this switch of being so upset.
How did your mom react? How did your mom react to
that? Not pleased.
Yeah.
I mean, everyone was concerned, certainly.
What did she do? Did your family decide to, I don't know, take your therapy or anything, or just kind of like talk about it, or ignore it?
We didn't go down that route for a while. So I started like trying to read about different things. This was sort of like pre-internet days, but I was flipping through some magazine and saw an ad. It was something about like anxiety, and I think honestly it was for some medication. It described different symptoms of things. So I remember like tearing it out of the magazine and showing it to my parents. And I think even just doing that alarmed them, like, okay, something's going on here. She needs help. So I did end up seeing a therapist, but I didn't know how to explain what was really happening, and even talking to doctors about it. And then later on in college, trying to explain it to the like physician at the university, I couldn't, like nobody understood it. So it was just like, well, if you had your hearing checked and you think maybe it is just like an anxiety thing, or like people throw around like OCD or depression or all these different things that, just trying to put a label on it, but nothing really helped out. So I think my parents were desperate for me to feel better, but just didn't know what to do.
Right, because it seems like it seems like an annoyance more, like to people who don't have it. It seems like this person's just extra annoyed at something.
You can exactly, like, can't you just get over it and
going through a phase or
those things? Exactly. Yeah, or like, oh, you must be having a bad day. It's like, well,
right.
Every day is not a bad day, but this is happening every day.
And how did you cope with it then? So it sounded like you were kind of ignoring, well, not ignoring, but you're trying to get your way out of meals and whatnot.
Yeah, and then when I did have to sit through meals, we would turn on the TV. So my family was
background noise.
Very nice to do that, but and at first that was a great fix, and then I think unfortunately you get sort of used to that, and then it's like the moments in between commercials or commercial break, the TV break, just even that few seconds of silence.
Yeah. It's
so strange how that works. And I've noticed that since, like, my husband and I, when we're eating dinner, we play music a lot. And someone at the conference last year who's like 10 years younger taught me how to like get rid of the gap between songs, because I was saying like, oh, it's so nice to play music, and then
I always cross fade the full
in between.
Yeah.
So now I know about that, and like all these little hacks are awesome. But when I was younger, it was pretty much TV, and I'm lucky my parents would do that. So I got through it.
And at school, how was it at school?
Pretty brutal.
So it wasn't just eventually it wasn't just your family that's triggering you. Your people at school, yeah.
Yeah. So I remember by middle school. So I'm, as I know, I don't want to trigger anyone listening to the podcast or anything like that. So I'll try to keep it fairly general. But something that happened in 7th grade was I'd always really enjoyed school, and I had an algebra class, like a pre-algebra something or other. And the teacher we'd been in school a few weeks, everything's going fine, and the first test comes around, and she decided to hand out hard candy for the test.
Oh my God.
Which was just brutal. So that ended up being what she did every single test, and any big exams at all. And then it started being like, oh, it's Friday, so you guys have had a good week, we're going to do hard candy. And I just would notice that I would just sort of like blank during that time, and I couldn't focus, and my grades started suffering.
So it did affect your grades, okay. Mm-hmm.
It did, yeah. And I really thought for a while, there's so many other things going on when you're that age. So I thought, that what I now know as misophonia was like a small part of things that were bothering me, but that I kind of thought I had, a bad attitude, or like couldn't cope with things other people could handle. Cause I'd think, look, everybody around me can take their tests. They can all be fine. Like, what is wrong with me? So then I started thinking, okay, I must have like an attention issue, all these different things happening. So I never thought to say to my teacher, I mean, at that time I was probably like 12 years old, to say, I really can't focus when this is happening. It just didn't even occur to me. So yeah, grades definitely suffered. And that would happen, unfortunately food's a big part of celebrations. It's a big part of like, when you're working hard or trying to focus, a lot of people eat or drink things. So throughout school and into college, it was always really hard to be in those environments.
Yeah, studying in college or even lectures in college, people just bring whatever they want in.
I know.
And there's vending machines everywhere, so. Yeah,
I don't miss those days at all. It's tough.
And did it start to affect kind of the people you used to, your friend circle, like the types of people you used to hang out with? Like, did it start to? I'm curious how it affected your social life back then.
Yeah, for the most part, even though I was bothered during like quiet times, like test taking or in school, just by general people, for the most part, the main triggers in my life were still my parents and my brother. So, my friends, I don't know if it was like sort of like a honeymoon period or what it was, but for a long time, they didn't really bother me much. And I was pretty open with them. So I would say like, at that time I would make jokes about it. Like, if somebody was eating a bag of chips, it's like, oh, I think they can hear you like a mile away, and just try to, make light of it.
Yeah.
And they just kind of knew like, all right, she's got that weird thing where like if we're eating around her, she's going to make a comment. So, young people are fine with like turning on music, turning on TV. So I feel like that was for the most part fine. And then by the time I got to college, I just think it's a lot of like larger groups eating together for the most part. So it's just, I actually do better in that environment. I know not everybody does, but if there's a lot of conversation going on and just more of like a general hum in the background, I'm able to eat with people, which I am pretty fortunate to be able to do that, because I know some people can't even be around others eating or see them.
Right.
So I think it got better.
Around that time, did you have any visual triggers?
I don't think I did, and I think it's something I've developed. So there definitely were times I remember, having my headphones on, being on like public transportation or something, and seeing somebody, across the way, chewing gum or doing something that I felt if I could hear it, it would be awful. So just sort of doing that, like we now joke and say it's like a death stare, and I realize sometimes I'm just absolutely glaring in someone's direction. And I think that is the visual trigger sort of getting to me, but it took a long time until that showed up.
Yeah, I do have them, and it's just I don't remember having those back then. I feel like it's the brain kind of warning you that to anticipate.
I just think it's so fascinating to talk to some of the different people we talked to at the conference, and now I've done a couple group chats, and just how similar a lot of the stories really are with obviously everyone has their own version of it, but how things start and then how different triggers develop and things that show up, and it's just so strange to me.
Yeah. Okay. So being in a big group helped out in college, and so somehow you made it out of college, obviously.
Yep.
Or did you not? I don't know. Maybe
I did.
But good. Okay.
I made it.
If you didn't, I would have cut this out anyway. but it's good. You did make it. Like, we all persevere somehow. We all persevere.
I know.
Kind of bruised and
you look
battered,
back and it's done.
Yeah. So you're out in the real world. So then what's going on? Did you get your own place, get a job right away?
Yeah. So after college, I actually went to grad school. So I went to grad school for school psychology, finished that up, and long story short, I worked in the schools for a few years, but it was a very high stress environment, which I think was really tough with the misophonia, and a lot of, working directly next to people in lunch settings and all these things. So I detoured from that, but I did enjoy my grad school years. So it was almost just like another version of college where it was a lot of larger meals, and I was able to live on my own and all these things that make living pretty easy.
Was the choice of schools like psychology, if you think it was affected at all by kind of an interest in your condition, or was it coincidence?
I think it absolutely had to be, but I don't think I ever admitted that to myself. But I always wanted to help kids.
Yeah.
I think that.
Did you see a lot of kids that were having other like issues when you as you were growing up, like other kind of ADHD or mental health issues?
Honestly, not a ton of it. I just don't think it was really talked about. I don't think it's really talked about. I mean, the big thing, it's like crazy to think back about it, but when I was growing up, I remember there were like 2 support groups in my school, and one was like grief counseling, so people who have lost someone close to them in their family, and then there was like a divorce group. And that was it. Like, you'd either have that or the other, and there'd be no other issues, which is very strange to think about, but it was just, I don't know. I think it was sort of, unfortunately, this mentality of just sort of push through things.
We'll teach you how to get over stuff, or if you just work hard, you'll get over it.
Any of that, right? Exactly. Right. Exactly. Yeah, we'll just sweep it under the rug.
If you put your mind to it, then we'll fix your mind.
Exactly.
And get over it.
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah, I was just curious if I was curious. Yeah, if this had what had kind of like influenced your choice to go into psychology, but I was also gonna be curious if you had seen a lot of people who had issues, what accommodations they might have had that it would have been nice if you'd also gotten. But sounds like there wasn't a ton that was talked about, but you were still inspired to try to help kids with psychological issues. Right. So you were briefly in a school environment, obviously kind of a war zone for misophonia.
Yeah, a lot of like lunch meetings, and it was around that time that I believe the New York Times article that came out that sort of like really got the label out there of misophonia.
Yeah, I think I have a link to that somewhere on the site or something. But
I was actually looking back at my email before we started chatting, because I knew there was a time. So I started dating my husband at the end of college, and when I was in grad school is when I figured out the name of this. So I was looking back at old emails, because I remember we would send things back and forth about it. And in 2011, I sent him an article, and I said, I found this audiologist. I'm really excited. I'm going to go see what's going on with that. So I think it was around then that I figured out what the terminology was. And I, found the email that I wrote to the audiologist, and I was sort of explaining what my symptoms were and how long I've had it. And I said, please let me know if you think I might be a candidate for just an exam. And she wrote back and said, absolutely, based on what I was saying. So that was really, really cool.
And that was
one of the people.
Yes, that was in Jersey.
Yeah, so that was really strange, because I don't know at the time if it was the Misophonia Association.
Place I would expect.
It was really. It gets weirder, actually. So I think it was through the Misophonia Association. They had a link for providers, and it was listing, like, it even went so far as like the UK, and then somewhere in Canada, and then in the US it listed, I think, like 4 providers. It was strange. And one of them it said the Northeast, and it broke it down, and the audiologist was in the small town I live in New Jersey, which was the weirdest thing ever. I was like, this is crazy. Yeah. I thought I might have to drive 6 hours or whatever.
Right.
I ended up going to her, which was a neat experience, because I got to hear about some of the research she was doing, but she was pretty late in her career, so she only ended up working with me for about a year. So, I got basically like a report explaining that I have misophonia, and we tried a couple things, but even though like the treatment didn't continue on and I didn't get to do much follow-up with her, it was still definitely like the beginning of the
transformative
journey, I guess.
Yeah. Somebody took you seriously.
Yeah.
And so she gave you some kind of a report, or like a doctor's note-ish kind of thing? Or
she did. So basically, I think what it was that because I think the exam was over, it was basically like a typical hearing exam and then a questionnaire. And then they were trying to decide if I should get fitted for like sound generators, the kind that, a lot of people
the Widex kind of stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Like they look like a hearing aid, but they put out sound. So I did end up getting them. And I think the report was written so that I could attempt to get reimbursed with insurance, which didn't end up happening. But it was a pretty like basic report saying, like misophonia is a relatively like newly researched disorder, and this is what we know about it, and kind of pointing to some different information. But I did wear the sound generators for a while, and back then it was sort of like what they were doing for tinnitus, which was that they believed that if you play the sound a certain number of hours a day, that it would like increase your threshold for noise.
Okay.
So it was supposed to actually be a treatment. So it wasn't supposed to be like a coping mechanism. So I would try that, but basically what I was doing was I'd realize like if I turned it up louder, I couldn't hear the sounds that were bothering me. So I think I sort of abused the whole system and ended up not doing much for me except...
Yeah.
Exactly.
No, you were experimenting. You were experimenting.
Yeah.
No one really knew what they were
then,
doing.
We now know that unfortunately does not work as a treatment, but it's an awesome option to have, sound in your ears so you're not hearing all these other things.
Do you still use something like that, or do you have them around?
I do. So I have them. I still have them. I really rarely use them because I find that if I have them on like a little bit, then I'm still kind of focusing on the noises that are triggering me. And if I turn them up too loud, then I can't hear conversation. So sort of felt like I was using it as a crutch. And I don't know. I think it works wonders for some people. It just hasn't been great for me.
Yeah. I mean, I've heard people not wanting to use it all the time and just kind of getting used to the sound. And then if it's not there, then you might freak out. Or just at least having him around, having a treatment around can just help even when you don't have him on, just knowing that it's there.
I remember
helps diffuse the fight or flight kind of
exactly.
paranoia.
Yeah, there's definitely a big psychological component there. I think we were talking about that at the conference with a couple other people, that just knowing that you have a set of headphones on you is incredible, or like earplugs. Like my husband and I were going somewhere a couple months ago. We're going on a trip, and like we're getting in the car, and he's like, "Oh, so we call the sound generators. We just ended up calling them ears, which is easy. He's like, did you bring your ears and the batteries?"
Yeah.
And I was like,
yes.
I was like, yeah, I have those. I also have earplugs. I also have my sound canceling headphones. I have my AirPods. He's like, all right, okay, you're set. Like, always prepared.
You're like me, multiple form factors, batteries or no batteries, and
oh yeah.
So maybe let's talk about your Mr. Right here.
Yeah.
What? Okay, you met him in college, so you hadn't.
I did.
You didn't know it had a name yet until later.
I did not. I did not, but I certainly knew certain things bothered me.
So I'm picturing you guys, bump into each other, fall in love madly. How long did it take for him to start pissing you off?
Start triggering. It's so weird how that works. Honestly, I think a fairly long time, because it's just that
honeymoon phase.
It's wild. It took a very long time, and I think as you get more comfortable with each other, and you realize like, all right, this guy's not going to like run for the hills if I say that him chewing bothers me. Then that's when noises start popping up and things happening. But I'm very lucky. He's a very polite eater. He's very, very supportive of misophonia. So it's been great. And I've always sort of emphasized that I don't want anyone who knows about it to really change much of what they're doing, because I just feel a lot of guilt with that. And I think even though there's some simple things people can do to make my life easier, it's still my issue. Mm-hmm. So I really try to come up with other ways that don't involve like him, not eating his favorite food, although we do have some things that we just avoid buying, which I really appreciate. Mm-hmm. So, we play music, and, sometimes we'll have the TV on and different things, but I think a big thing for us is like how he copes with things, and how I always have is just like absolutely humor, and just trying to notice the absurdity of different things. And, sometimes it gets so ridiculous, you just have to laugh about it. So that's definitely been helpful.
Yes, I like to use humor as a way to douse these kinds of things too. Sometimes it's really the most. Yeah, sometimes it's the only productive way to do it.
Yeah.
Okay, so you don't eat. All you do is eat hard-boiled eggs or something.
Yeah.
Do you? Is there?
It's actually. Mm-hmm. I was going to say, it's funny you said that. We we went to a wedding this summer, and I haven't gotten to follow up with the couple yet, but we're seeing them next week when we head up to Boston. So during the wedding vows, the groom said to the bride that he like vowed to help her like open her dream restaurant where they'd only have mushy food. So, you know, my husband and I just like immediately looked at each other like, oh my God, she must have misophonia. So I need to find out about it. But people often say like, oh yeah, if there was a place with all mushy food, but I don't know if I'm a fan of that either, because mushy foods have plenty of noises. So, you know, hard-boiled eggs, I'd still find problems.
Yeah, I didn't want to trigger anybody, but I was gonna say, we'll see how it sounds when I do the editing. But I was gonna say, yeah, hard-boiled eggs, like if a few minutes, they don't sound like anything when you bite through them, but later on, the leftovers can make problems.
I know, it's such a shame. There's no perfect food.
So is there anything else that he does that's absolutely maddening that wants you to strangle your husband? Or
yeah, unfortunately, just like
I know he's very respectful, but
it's typing on his laptop drives me nuts. I really hate that. So he tries to use his laptop upstairs, and he still says like, I cannot. Yeah, exactly. I cannot believe you can hear that. This is unbelievable. But like we'll be out and I'll hear something and say like, oh yeah, I love the song. He's like, what are you talking about? And I've noticed that my whole life. It's just we focus on these things we're not supposed to be focusing on. It's these noises, and unfortunately, yeah. So laptop I hear all over the house. He doesn't use it all that much, luckily, at home. Yeah, plenty of other weird things. So it's not all food, but
okay. But yeah, so it's not a so it's a few triggers, but it seems like you guys have found some way to just
we figured things out.
Yeah,
and sometimes he forgets things, and that's totally understandable. Right. And sometimes I'm able to laugh it off. Sometimes I'm not.
Yeah, so those days he sleeps in the garage, but but otherwise it seems pretty fine. And then at work, what's going on there?
Well, so for me, I get to be.
Oh, you're working at home, of course.
But I do sometimes go in, and what I've actually noticed is that I sometimes wonder if I've like deconditioned myself to be able to handle certain noises, because I was in there just the other day, and I have like this small place I can go by myself, but I had my door open. It was fairly warm, and somebody in the room next door was typing, and I had to shut my door, and then I could hear it through the wall. It was wild, because it's not like an everyday thing where I'm exposed to this, but still I couldn't get the work done. Then I ended up putting on white noise, and I got through it. But
it's great that you at least it's at least great that you have a room to go into. It's not a complete open office.
Oh, I'm so lucky. Some of the stories that I see on different like misophonia blogs or posts, or some of the Facebook groups, some of the work situations are like torturous, and some people luckily have had great experiences talking to their bosses, and some are just like basically told to suck it up.
Yep, or
keep working.
Get out of here. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I consider myself very lucky.
So all of your family members and people that you live with know what. So do you tell strangers now? Like, do you tell other people at all?
Yeah, so I've never told a stranger. So I sort of feel like even if I'm annoyed in public, I'm not going to be around that person enough that they need to know anything. And I also feel like it's really none of my business to tell someone that they're bothering me in public. But that's just how I function. I'm kind of non-confrontational, and probably could stick up for myself more. But we're very good at bottling stuff up. All of us. It's just exactly. I know, sad but true.
Strangers. I don't know why I asked strangers, but friends.
New friends. Very recently, I think I was saying recently that the conference we went to a few weeks ago, that was my second conference, and last year and this year when I got home, I just sort of felt like you just have all this confidence about it, and you're like, all right, this isn't something I chose to have, and there's all this research about it's a neurological disorder, and all these there's science behind it and all these things. So I sort of start to feel like I have the right to explain it to people and see what happens. So I tried with a friend who's a newer friend in the last year or so, and she was going to bring her dog over. I have a dog, and they were going to play, and she was going to come at 8 a.m. and she said, I'll bring bagels and coffee, which is the loveliest offer. But I started thinking in my head, like, how am I going to get out of this? So I ended up texting her and I said, I'm going to explain this tomorrow, but please don't bring any food. And
Wow,
you can laugh
okay.
about it now. I will explain this to you. And she said, I can't wait to hear this.
Had you seen her eat before, or was it just like, I don't
No,
want
I
to even
just
deal
knew
with it?
like, and what I ended up explaining, so I ended up explaining misophonia to her when she came over that morning. She's an awesome person, and I knew she was going to be really interested in it and very like genuinely open to hearing my experience instead of judging it.
Yeah.
So I was very comfortable with that. And I was explaining misophonia to her, and then I said, I could have gotten through us eating bagels together, but I just knew I wasn't really going to be present. Because that's what happens is like, if there's not a lot of noise going on in the background and I'm one-on-one with somebody and we're eating, I just end up focusing on all the wrong things. And then I just sort of feel like they probably noticed that I'm off, and like, why not just avoid all that? So we did, and it was awesome. And she just said like, listen, we don't need to eat when we hang out. I'd much rather have a real conversation with you and not have you be like tortured or distracted.
Yeah.
So that felt great. And her response was awesome. So I think I feel like I could do that again.
Yeah, that's excellent. No, I hope that inspires other people listening to kind of, not to necessarily everybody, but this seemed like a perfect situation. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it's true. Like I didn't hurt her feelings. And I said to her, it is so generous of you to offer to bring that. Like, that's so cool that a friend's like, let me bring you breakfast. Unfortunately, it's not my favorite thing. So yeah, it worked out fine.
Big groups, your family, your immediate family seem to be cool with it, but a lot of people struggle with, a larger gathering of people who they feel guilty about giving the miso glare to and and whatnot. So how do you deal with stuff in that kind of environment?
Yeah, so I think it's taken a while to figure out how to get through it. So I've had plenty of bad coping strategies, like wearing those sound generators and like having my hair down so people couldn't even see it. And then I'm sure I wasn't even listening to people, which was not a good thing. Now I like to help. So I really enjoy cooking. So luckily, it seems very normal for me to be in the kitchen helping people. So I notice, if I'm helping set the table, maybe while people are still like eating appetizers, drinking cocktails, doing whatever, that gives me a little break. And then helping with, putting things on the table, clearing the table, all of that, just even like getting away a little bit.
Yeah. Well, speaking of drinks, does alcohol affect anything good or positively or negatively?
So it's really interesting you said that. So I have definitely, so my family and my in-laws, we all like enjoy wine and we'll have a cocktail and we're together. It's a very like celebratory thing. And I think that I've always sort of like duped myself that it makes the misophonia better. I think what it does is like maybe the first drink relaxes me, but you sort of keep going, and then the next day, even if we're not talking like a hangover or anything like that, just I feel like some alcohol in me the night before means the next morning I'm more sensitive to sound. So it's always this juggling of like, what do I have tomorrow morning if I'm doing another family event or staying somewhere and we're going to be up early eating breakfast or something. Then I really try to limit alcohol because I don't want to wake up.
Maybe take the edge off a little bit, but just think
it's
ahead
definitely like a
to
double-edged
tomorrow.
sword. I struggle with it. I don't know what the best thing is there.
It sounds like a research paper waiting to happen. Amount of alcohol. Have you noticed anything? Have you noticed anything like that with any other kinds of foods that may be affecting it? Or
I really haven't. What I have noticed overall, and it kind of sounds like an obvious thing, but I don't always put it into practice, is just generally eating healthy foods, keeping things well balanced, trying to exercise. All of that helps, and I think it's all like so compounded. Like those things help because you're healthier, and then you're feeling better, and then you're feeling better about yourself, and then you're able to handle things better. So I don't know if it really is any of the foods in particular or the exercise in particular, but I think in general, trying to be our healthiest puts us in the best situation to handle triggers as they come. But I certainly don't practice that all the time.
Yeah, no, likewise. But I remember Dave at the conference was saying that he's being very quote unquote clean food, organic and unprocessed, and lots of salads and lots of exercises. And he said his wife's telling him that his miso's probably been cut in half. Now it's still bad enough that he's showing up at these conventions, but
Right. But it's so motivating to hear things like that. And I'm all for trying like anything once. Like you know, my husband jokes that I've like been that way with, my career choices and all kinds. Like I always have some like grand plan. Like I'm going to go all into this, whatever. So I've tried different things. Like I attempted to be vegan. I think it lasted like 3 days. I tried like cutting out all gluten, and I have all these thoughts of like, this was going to be the thing that totally gets rid of misophonia. But I think in the end, it really is just like being balanced. And then I've sort of introduced more like really trying to be gentle with myself. And that's something that sort of came up at the first conference I went to. It's just like, this is a hard thing to go through throughout the day. And it does sort of feel like a fight throughout the day. So it's hard. And I think we're always just sort of prepared. I guess it's that fight or flight thing, like ready for the next trigger. So I'm trying to be like more gentle with myself and remember to like meditate and take time out and, give myself little breaks. So I think all that just goes towards like general health.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's almost like telling your brain that, or giving your brain something to look forward to. I think I've talked about in other interviews, like kind of giving, like kind of time boxing the triggers so that, even if you start hearing triggers and you have an appointment at like 3 o'clock or whatever, or a massage or something, it's kind of a way of telling your brain that, it's going to be okay in some amount of time.
Yeah.
So, you're not about to get killed by some abstract unknown force.
Exactly.
So yeah, that's a great tip. Like, whether it's meditate or, maybe not a calendar, but like plan little breaks or things to give your body and your mind something to look forward to is a great way to
even
kind
just
of
like standing up and doing like stretching or jumping, just something to like mix things up.
Yeah.
I really think just like sort of gets you out of that mindset of focusing on it.
Yeah, because what it does for me is it takes me out of the focus I want, and it just kind of takes over. So, getting up and stretching is kind of like puts your brain back takes control back from your brain, which is obviously going astray.
Yeah.
So,
right.
Well, cool. Do you have any other kind of tips or anything you want to tell people who have not kind of had the chance to be as kind of open as you have on how to deal with this? A lot of people are listening to each of these episodes and hearing about misophonia for the first time. Maybe they got referred to them by a friend, but anything you want to tell people?
That's so exciting to me because I remember that time. So I think that's the time when like all the doors open. So even if someone's in a situation where the family's not as supportive or they don't quite feel ready to even, approach it and see if their family is supportive. I think something that's great is, finding someone to talk to who has misophonia. So, with the internet now, there are all these Facebook groups. If you go on Misophonia Association, there's like regional support groups. So I'm part of the Northeast Regional Support Group. And, people just write in things like, this is really hard for me today. Does anyone have advice about this? Or, I'm thinking of talking to my boss about misophonia and different accommodations. Does anyone have any ideas for me? So I think just trying to find people to talk to just sort of like builds up your confidence and makes you realize like you're not alone in this. And there are, even if people with misophonia can only support each other, that would be good enough. But there are a lot of other people who really see this as what it is. I just encourage people to, I guess, just look it up and find that support.
Yeah, find a support group around you. I know there's the big Facebook groups which tend to just be kind of a giant free for all. It's just a lot around. Things are kind of hard to keep up. I know you're in charge of the Northeast kind of regional group. I'm in charge of the Midwest one. I know we know John, our friend John's in charge of the Southwest one, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And they tend to, these groups, mine doesn't get a lot of engagement, but there's like over 100 people in there right now. And but everyone's, I know misophonia has no kind of geographic bounds, but it's a good way to kind of like split things up a bit into something that's kind of more manageable.
And I don't know if this is something you can include in the podcast, but if anyone has a question for me or something I said maybe you want to know more about or just want general support from me, you can totally share my email address or whatever, because there have been certain people that I've met along the way who have been so open and have totally changed how I feel about this. So if I can help anyone, that's awesome.
That's very generous. Yeah, I'll get your contact info and put it in the show notes.
Okay. Yeah, that's great.
That'd be great. But other than that, I want to thank you, Ellen. It's always good to see you at the convention. Well, I've only seen you
Yeah.
like once or twice, but already, I'm already looking forward to seeing everybody at the next one.
I know, me
And,
too. And the next one's in Philadelphia, so we'll be on my home turf.
I just saw the dates. It's like early October now, which is great.
Early October. Yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah, thanks again, Ellen, and
Yeah.
good luck with everything.
Thank you for doing this. This is so great for the whole community. It's awesome.
Thank you for listening. Remember, you can follow us on Instagram or Facebook at Misophonia Podcast. And you can, of course, email me at hello@misophoniapodcast.com. Still sending out lots of stickers all over the world. Just send me your mailing address. The music is by Moby. And until next week, wishing you peace and quiet.